Hello everyone, welcome back to ch205. Today I'll be showing how we can use a function or a subroutine to calculate the average of a list of numbers. So this is example 2.3 in the textbook. So if you want to follow the textbook, that is example 2.3 on page 41. So we're going to talk about the structure of a subroutine or a function in VBA. Okay. The file corresponding to this lecture is example 2.3. It's in scripts tab on VBA. So you can also download the Excel file as well as this script. Alright, so here's the script. It's pretty much like the average we used, or the script to calculate the average we used in example 2.2 and in the lecture before. We want to talk about the difference here. So we have option explicit, means that we have to say the type of every variable we use. The indices starts from 1 based on this line. This is the name of a subroutine. It starts from sub and ends with end sub down here. We introduce the variables here as before. We have an array with 20 elements in here to read the numbers. I is integer. We activate the sheet. Start with row 2. Num numbers initially 0. And then we read the first number from row 2, which is 70, right? So we're going to read it. Now we're going to go to this loop and we're going to check if the number is bigger than or not 0. If the number is not 0 or and. So this is a logical and, that means both conditions should hold for this while loop to continue. And the number of numbers less than 20, if both actually hold, then we're going to read the next number, we're going to crank up the number of numbers by 1 and crank up the act row by 1 and get the next number from the next row from this line and then check the condition. By the end of the loop, we have all the numbers stored in input numbers array. You crank up the number of rows by 1 again. Be ready to print out the result on 2 rows below the last number in the list, right, on this cell. Okay, so then we check if the number of numbers is bigger than 0. We have to calculate the average, right? So here is the new lesson for this lecture. Instead of calculating the average like in this line by dividing the sum by the number of numbers, we're going to call a function. So this is the statement. We just write call. This is a keyword. We have to write it exactly. And then the name of a function or a subroutine that you want to call, and then calculate the average in that function. So we just call, the name of it is summer, and then the arguments that we have to pass through the list to this function. So I'm going to send the number of numbers, the list of numbers, and then the average I want to get back. All of them go into this argument list. So these 3 go in there, and note that for array you have to put open close parentheses, but you don't have to say the dimension of it. We know that dimension is 20. Excel will figure it out. Don't worry about it. Don't write it here. So we just open close parentheses for array. Let's jump to the array. So the array starts with similar sub and sub. So the bottom of my main code up to here is main code. Main code is done by end sub. Below my summer starts. So summer is a script that calculates the average for me. Starts with a sub and ends with end sub. Here the argument list, I have 3 variables. Now these variables can be different from the variables that I called in the main function. The main function, I called it num numbers, input numbers, and average. Here I have different names, and nums and average could be different. But Excel makes one-to-one correspondence. So the value of num numbers go to n, the values in this array go to the nums. So suddenly nums become an array, although I didn't put parentheses in here. Because there is one-to-one correspondence, this would take the form of an array, and then average will have the value of the average here. So the first one goes to the first, the second argument goes to the second, and the third goes to the third. So just make sure that you compare these 2 lines. All right, now I'm in the function. I have all these variables. I can calculate the average, right? So how do we do it? Again, this subroutine, this piece of code is similar to the main code. You have to declare all the variables except these 3, because these 3 inherit their properties from the parents. So these are the parents, these are the children. If I define the parents type before, you don't need to define the children's type here. So n would be integer, nums would be double, and average would be, or AVG would be double. So I don't introduce these three, but I have to introduce everything else. Okay, so I'm going to introduce I and sum as integer and double here. Sum would be the total sum of the numbers. I go to this loop from I to n, and is the total number of numbers that I got from the argument here. And I calculate the sum. After I calculate the sum, I divide sum by n, I get the average. So, and then at this point, my subroutine is done, so I write exit sub and then end sub. So you have to have exit sub also. In here, you have to have exit sub as well because we have a function. As soon as you have a function in a subroutine, you have to have exit sub in addition to end sub. And exit sub should come before end sub. Same thing here. Because this is a function and we call it from somewhere else, you have to have exit sub and then end sub. So we're done with the function. We calculate the average. Average goes to this AVG, comes back to the main code, and then average will have that value. The next would be same as what we did before. We print out the average 2 lines below the last number, and then the value of it goes to the second column. If the number of numbers is 0, we're going to say no input numbers to average. All right, so that's the code written with a function included, and a function called summer, in which we calculate the average of the numbers. So let's give it a try and test it. So I'm going to go back to my spreadsheet, create some random list of numbers, and then go and click on this spreadsheet. Then go to the top menu, click on run, and then run. And then you see that the average is here. It's good to start with some numbers that we know the average up front, like I can do 1, 2, 3, right? And then 1, 2, 3, and then 1, 2, 3. So the average of these would be, let's calculate. 1, 2, 3 plus 3 is 6, and then 6, and then 6 total is 18. I have 9 numbers here. 18 divided by 9 should be 2. So let's calculate the average by the script. I'm going to go to the script, click on it, go to run menu, and then hit run. And the average is 2, which is correct. And if you put no numbers here, let's clean it up like that, and like this. And then go to the code, run menu, run. It says no input numbers to average. Clean it up. Looks like the code is working. Put back some random numbers. By the way, you should not leave any blank between the numbers, otherwise the code would assume this is the list, not the whole list. Okay, so put some numbers here. All right, there you go. So the code is ready. I hope this is useful. Thanks all for watching. Stay tuned for the next video on calculating the average using VBA program.